Thank you to these companies and organizations that make the Before I Die New Mexico Festival possible. A good goodbye. Gail Rubin puts the fun in funeral planning. Compassion and choices, improving care, expanding options, and empowering everyone to chart their end-of-life journey. Daniel's Family Funerals and Cremations, Fairview Memorial Park, Gabaldon Mortuary, Sandia Memory Gardens, and Vista Verde Memorial Park, all in the Albuquerque area. Estate Pros, offering professional dispersal of personal possessions due to a move, illness, or death. The Final Exit Network, educating about and defending the right to choose at end of life. French Funerals and Cremations and Sunset Memorial Park in Albuquerque. Gathering Us, providing in-person and virtual memorial services and online memorial pages. Keeper, providing hybrid and virtual memorial services and keeping memories alive with online tributes to preserve, celebrate, and share life legacies. Morris Hall, estate planning attorneys in New Mexico and Arizona. Remembering a Life, your guide to honoring a life well lived, from planning a tribute to mourning a loved one. And Retirement Extender, investment management services with a personalized strategy recommendation based on your needs and objectives.
Welcome back to Live in the Room and Live there on Zoom. I am very pleased to introduce to you our next speaker, Althea Halchuck, EJDCT. We're both CTs, and people will say, "You from Connecticut?" No, you're from Massachusetts originally. Althea is the founder of Ending Well Patient Advocacy LLC, and she has extensive background in end-of-life care, including 15 years of involvement with hospice, 7 years as a long-term care ombudsman in California, and she's a practicing end-of-life doula and death educator. She earned an executive juris doctorate degree in health law, and she is final exit surrogate consultant and death maven, trademarked. Please welcome Althea Halchuck.
Thank you. Thank you, Gail. Thank you, everyone, for being here and online. Welcome to the 5th Annual Before I Die New Mexico Festival. As she said, I'm Althea Halchuck, and I'm also Final Exit Network Surrogate Consultant. And in that role, I help people who are surrogates or healthcare proxies for other people. If they're having trouble enforcing an advance directive, they can call me and I can help them get through it. I also answer member questions on advance directives and living wills. In my program today, I'm going to talk about tips on choosing an effective surrogate. It may not be the person you think, ways to have your advance directive followed, and I also give you a little case study on one of my cases where I've actually helped a person who was having trouble enforcing her husband's advance directive. The key to having your health care wishes honored is choosing a surrogate who will speak for you and make sure your treatment wishes are followed. Your surrogate is so critical to the success of your planning. It's the first question on every advance directive. Who will your surrogate be? You want a bulldog. FEN's mission is all about choices, options, and education at the end of life. Ben Franklin, by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. Listen to Ben, because having no plan can lead to other people choosing critical care for you when you can't speak for yourself. Often you'll get the treatment you may not have wanted and have decisions made by a person you might not have chosen. These are the poster girls for failing to prepare. Every competent adult over age 18, I repeat, over age 18, can and should have an advance directive. These three women, Karen Ann Quinlan, Nancy Kruzan, and Terry Shivo, were in their 20s when they ended up in a persistent vegetative state with no hope of recovery. All three ladies were artificially kept alive because none had a written advance directive. After many years of fighting, the courts ultimately gave the three families the right to discontinue life support. And in the case of Terry Shivo, that made national news. Everybody butted into it. So this is what happens. It's a recipe for disaster. All three had landmark cases in the right to die movement or in the right to choose your own health care. But the pain for their family and their friends just can't be understated. Don't let this happen to you or your family. Create an advance directive and have the conversation about your treatment wishes with everyone in your circle, family, close friends, even people you work with. I'm just going to kind of briefly go through the advanced planning form. I think probably everybody in this room knows what an advanced care plan is, but the most important thing is choosing your surrogate, of course, and sharing your treatment wishes. Only about 30% of Americans have an advance directive, and that's up from 25%, and that's due to COVID when so many people found themselves in an ICU without an advance directive or a surrogate to help them make decisions. The basic parts are choosing a healthcare proxy or surrogate, someone you trust to act on your behalf when you can't speak for yourself. The other part is the living will, and it contains all of your healthcare, medical treatments you wish, you don't want, your body disposition at the end of life, organ donation, a memorial service, what music you want at your funeral. I have a woman that I'm the surrogate for, and she actually has a 5-page addition to a 5 wishes form where she spells out everything. She doesn't want smelly flowers by her bedside. And so you can do this, and this is what makes it, each one is so unique to the person that wrote it. All advance directives are state specific. Keep that in mind. So pick one that your state approves of. Every single state has free forms. Arizona has one, and I think it's 29 pages long, and that's including directions, but it's so cumbersome and full of legalese, it's hard to figure out. And I have a law degree, so really, I always recommend something like 5 wishes. There's another one called Prepare, and you can fill these out. They're easy to do. Now they have an online way to do it. And they also have a link to each state, which tells the person what requirement that state would need to make that advanced 5 wishes legal in their state. For instance, Indiana has a living will form that's only 1 page long that you need to attach to your 5 wishes to make it legal in Indiana. Other states have requirements for maybe a notary or how many witnesses. Those are the kinds of things that will make it legal in your state. So there's a lot of people, I live in Arizona, and we have a lot of people that come from Michigan and Minnesota, and so they live in 2 states. So what happens if they get sick in Minnesota and they need their advance directive? You want to make sure it's good in 2 states. So 5 wishes can cross the lines. Believe it or not, we're all going to die. I don't know. You need to prepare for your ending and do it right. But your advance directive isn't just for end-of-life wishes. A medical crisis can happen in the blink of an eye. Raise your hand if you've ever been in a car accident. More than one? How much worse would it have been if you were in a coma or in an ICU and you didn't have an advance directive? My 49-year-old brother-in-law had a massive stroke and no advance directive. Both of these events are survivable. They're not really end of life, but you need an advance directive because both of these events you can survive, but living a good quality of life and merely surviving can be 2 very different things. Don't wait till it's too late, you're too sick, once you're incapacitated, it's very late, too late. What is a surrogate? I keep saying that word, but a surrogate is a substitute healthcare decision maker. This is the person that speaks for the patient who lacks decision-making capacity. And usually a doctor has said, or two doctors have said, this person is incapacitated, can't make health care decisions, someone else has to step up and do it for them. They implement your advance directive and consent to or refuse some medical treatments. You need to carefully choose this person who will make decisions in accordance with your wishes and end-of-life goals. It isn't necessarily your husband or wife or spouse, your child, or even your best friend. A surrogate by any other name is like a rose by any other name will smell as sweet. There's many names that you'll hear that are really kind of the same thing. A healthcare agent, a proxy, a representative, durable medical power of attorney. Regardless of the name used, it's the individual recognized by either a facility, a doctor, the family, most important, to make decisions on behalf of an incapacitated patient. And this is probably the meat, if you will, of this presentation. It's traits you want to look for when you're choosing an effective surrogate. An effective, someone that's going to really go to bat for you and your wishes. Here are the top 10 traits. You want a person that's comfortable making decisions on your behalf, even if your wishes differ from theirs. And I mean, if you think about that, that's a difficult thing. If you want someone not to give you a feeding tube and this person thinks, oh, anything to stay alive, that's probably not the person for you. You want to talk to this person and your wishes are paramount. It's about you and not about your surrogate. 2, you want to find someone with the emotional strength to carry out choices, especially at end of life. When they involve a loved one, it's even worse. They need emotional strength. Look for that. Some people might feel guilt or feel second-guessed or be worried about what their family might think. Can they put those feelings aside and do what's best for you? That's the person you want to be looking for. Look for a strong communicator, a person who can effectively get the point across to the medical staff and your family, because those are two very distinct groups, but they all have a say, and really, they'll say it. Someone with an open mind and someone who's a good listener. 5, someone who's deliberative and assertive about your medical care and who'll stand up for you and your wishes and won't be intimidated, bullied, or guilted into something. And if you've ever been in a hospital in an ICU, when the doctors want you to do something, they can be bullies. They really can. They won't cave to pressure or back down when they feel a medical treatment goes against your wishes and will challenge any treatment decision when they feel it's contrary to yours. You want a warrior, not a wallflower. 6, you want a person who isn't afraid to ask questions. A surrogate isn't expected to know everything. How could you? But they need to ask questions so that people can lay out their options, medical staff, whoever, but they need to know what you don't know, so you need to ask questions. 7, you want a person who'll research your condition and keep asking questions until they understand the treatment options and requests from the staff. The person that I said I was surrogate for, she actually has some kind of weird cancer that they're calling the unicorn of cancers. There's like maybe 1% of people in the country that have this kind of cancer. So what do? I Google it. I want to know, like if I get called into the ICU because she's got a problem, I want to know what her condition is. You want someone that will do that. And I mean, it doesn't take much research, really. The internet is right at your fingers. You want a surrogate who will feel comfortable asking for help if they need it, if they feel ignored, overruled, or outnumbered. That happens very often. Support can come from an ethics committee. You can always call for an ethics committee consult. Now, whether you'll get one right away, I've been on several ethics committees, and they have to gather people, and they have to hear about it. They have to talk to the patient or the family, so you can get one. They're people you can talk to, and they don't make a decision. They just really give advice to the attending physician. You can talk to the legal or compliance department, and sometimes the legal department is a good one because they know the law and they know if a doctor's stepping over their bounds and not listening to you as a surrogate. And there's more about that later. There's been a lot of lawsuits about that lately. Or you can call me. Any member of FEN can call me, and I get calls all the time or emails about questions they have about their advance directive, anything to do with surrogacy. That's my job. 10, the most important thing, 9, I forgot 9. You want a person who'll remain calm in a crisis. You don't want somebody that's gonna be, so scared and not really able to make a decision. Things change fast in an ICU. You want somebody that is gonna remain calm in the storm. If you're lost at sea, this is the person you want in your lifeboat. 10, the most important thing is you want a person who's ready, willing, and able. If this person can't step up and serve when they need you, what good are they? So this is why you need to have somebody that will carry out the job, and it is a job. I've done it several times, and there's a lot that goes into it. It's a lot of responsibility. So what if you don't choose? Well, not choosing is like choosing. It's the same because if you don't, the choice is made for you. And it may be somebody you'd never want, like your least favorite sibling. There's an order, and it could be him or her, or your eldest child. Say you have 3 kids and the oldest one is like a mess. Do you really want this person making healthcare decisions for you? That can happen if you don't pick. I love this cartoon. There's Old Man Winter, and one brother is saying, oh, keep him on life support, do everything. And the other one's saying, I don't think we should let him linger. This is kind of what can happen. Or another very common scenario is a faraway relative who hasn't seen the patient in years swoops in to tell everyone what they think should be done. And swoops is an actual term that people use. Here's a typical hierarchy of decision makers. This one is for Arizona, because that's where I'm from, but many states follow this pattern. Common order is the spouse, the adult children, parents, domestic partner, a sibling, and adult close friends. When I was on an ethics committee in California, we would get these patients who looked like they had nobody, but if somebody called, they would find some friend that lived next door that knew this person for 20 years and had conversations with them about end of life. So any port in a storm, as they say, as far as surrogates go. The healthcare providers just want to know what kind of decision to make. Sometimes states don't have, California's one, they don't have a hierarchy like this. I was just looking at the law. I did a advanced directive class, and they were all over the place, and who gets to pick and who doesn't get to pick. And really, the attending physician a lot of times can say, oh, I pick you, or I pick you. And they're supposed to do a good faith effort, but how are you to know, like, how they've chosen? In any family, there's always a loudmouth, and that's the person they're going to pick. That isn't maybe the person that hasn't spoke to his mother in 5 years. So really, you need to pick. Again, I'm just saying, pick before someone does it for you. Sometimes the attendant will pick a social worker, and this person may not even had a conversation with the patient or know anything about them. So another thing that happens when you don't pick is the medical staff will turn to somebody in the room, whether there's an advance directive and a surrogate is named or not. That happens pretty frequently. If there's 3 or 4 people in the room around the bed and they want a decision, they just listen to the person who speaks up. And if the surrogate doesn't step up and say, no, stop right there, it's my job. That's why you need somebody with a big mouth like me that will say that. You don't want the wallflower or somebody that's intimidated by their siblings. Sometimes the medical staff will try to reach a consensus. My brother-in-law, Rob, I mentioned him before, he had a stroke, and the consensus part came in where he was intubated. the neurologist told us, you know, he's never going to have, he had the worst kind of stroke you can have, and he was bleeding in his brain, and what do you want me to do? He's never going to be the same. He's going to be paralyzed. He gave us the litany of things he was never going to be the same with, and there were 3 brothers and me in the room, other brothers, and 2 brothers said, he told us he really didn't want that. He, you know, let him go. And the 3rd brother said, no, do everything. Well, the default is do everything. And so this one brother overrode the other 2 brothers who actually had a conversation with the patient. And so this is what happens. He's 5 years later still has the quality of life that the neurologist described. And if he had capacity, which he doesn't, a court has ruled he's incompetent, they call it in court, he wouldn't want this life if he had a choice. So you need to have the conversation. You need to have the conversation, oh, I'm sorry, I blew right past Antonio, and he's so cute. Expectation is the mother of all frustration, isn't it? You know, your expectations, dashed. You need to have a conversation with your surrogate about your expectations, what you want from them, what they expect from you, and it's all about expectations. You're trusting this person to make your healthcare, you're trusting them with your life, basically. Is there any wiggle room in there? Do they have to follow that advance directive like it's the Bible? Or do they have some kind of leeway to make decisions in your best interest? You want a balance between granting detailed power but leaving enough flexibility to address any unforeseeable or subjective issues as long as it's in your best interest. And a lot of these advance directives are sometimes boilerplate, so it can be subjective. And so you want to talk to your surrogate about what you expect. You need to have many conversations, not just one. This isn't a one and done. This is conversations with your surrogate, your family, anyone else who might be contacted. What if your surrogate isn't around? They're going to go down a list, call somebody else. Nancy Kruzan, remember her, one of my poster girls? She was taken off life support after the Supreme Court said no to her parents. It went down to back to the lower court, and they accepted testimony from her friends. She had no written directive, but she had conversations with people in her work, and she said, I wouldn't want to live like a vegetable all hooked up to machines. Well, that's exactly what she was doing. So they accepted that testimony, and they let her parents remove her from life support. What does quality of life mean to you? At what point do you consider it not worth living? Would you ever want your surrogate to take you off hydration or nutrition? Can they enter you into a care facility, hospice, comfort care? All of this requires many conversations. It's not easy, and you can't really have every I dotted because you just don't know. Think of the advance directive as your roadmap and the conversations with your surrogate as directions on that map. Have a plan B. You need to plan ahead. Is your surrogate, what if he's on vacation or backpacking through Africa, not willing to be your agent? He died. I mean, things happen. What if you've lost touch for a little while? You need to have a plan B. You have to have another person lined up just in case this one isn't available during your crisis. Here are some things to consider. It's really not that complicated to fill out an advance directive. It takes about a half an hour, unless you do like my patient, who really, she has 5 pages added. I mean, she really put some thought into it, and I love that about her. People's wishes can change because it's a hypothetical that you're really making these treatment options based on. So you don't know what's going to happen, and your wishes can change. All of a sudden, there's a new cure for what disease that you have, and now you really need to kind of tweak your advance directive. You can revoke your surrogate at any time and appoint a new one. Your wishes could change due to remarriage, health, a miracle cure. You move to another place. Consider having a lawyer if it's that complex. Although I'm not a lawyer. I have a law degree, but I'm not a lawyer. And I get asked that all the time. Do you need a lawyer to do this? No, you don't. You really don't need a lawyer. Sometimes you need a notary, but that isn't a lawyer. So really, unless it's really complex, you don't need one. You can do it yourself. Although you do need a witness, so someone's going to have to witness you signing. You can revoke your advance directive orally by telling your healthcare provider you no longer want that or some part of your treatment. However, you can't cross out. If you change the surrogate and you want to cross it out on your advance directive, that's a no-no because it kind of invalidates it. So you need to do a new one with whatever changes you've made. You do a new one, just destroy the old copies and give copies to your family and your surrogate. How often should you do this? They call it the 6 Ds, every decade. And that's probably okay if you're young and healthy. If you're 30 or 40, 10 years from now, okay. But if you're in your 70s or older, or maybe even younger, or you have some things going on, you probably want to look at it more than 10 years. You have a decline in your health. All of a sudden, now things are happening. First, it's a knee replacement, a hip replacement, an elbow replacement. You've got AFib. It's a litany. So all of these things are changing. How would that change your advance directive? Your diagnosis changes. You're healthy one day and you get a cancer diagnosis the next. Like suddenly your future scenario is here. You need to look at your advance directive and make changes or not. That's really up to you. Divorce. In most states, your ex-husband, once your decree is final, cannot be your surrogate. There are some states that will allow it. I talk generally because, some states do, some states don't, most states don't. Like, once he's your ex, pick another surrogate. Distance of the surrogate. Now, somebody I'm working with, I have a 97-year-old aunt. I'm her surrogate. She's in Massachusetts. And so telemedicine. I'm in all of the conferences for her health care. I go and visit because I have family on the East Coast. I go and visit her. So really with telemedicine and COVID, I call it one of the blessings of COVID is that telemedicine has taken off. And they can have a tablet in the ICU and they can talk to you like you're in the room. So distance, not so much unless you feel like you need somebody next door. The death of the surrogate, they can't really make decisions for you if they're dead. Or if you lose a spouse, that's another thing. If that spouse isn't your surrogate, but that affects your life like nothing else. So really, that's a good time to look at your advance directive. You could do it on Healthcare Decisions Day is the day after tax day. So it's April 16th every year. That's a good time to do it, or on your birthday. Why do so many advance directives fail? Oh my goodness. They can't find your copy because no one gave it to the doctor or the healthcare facility or whatever. The AARP said 35% of advance directives can't even be found. So keep it handy. Give a copy to anyone you think might be called upon, but keep a list so if you change it, you get your new one to people that need to have it. Keep it in your glove box of your car. That's the first place after a car accident an EMT will look. Keep it in your house if you're single and living alone. Keep it someplace where people would walk in and find it if something happened to you, because you really want your wishes followed. And they can't be followed if they can't find your directive. Another reason, others were not aware you ever completed it or where it is. No one knew it existed because people get queasy talking about end-of-life stuff, or, ooh, I don't want to talk about that with my kids, or my poor daughter, she just knows. We have the conversation all the time, so she knows. Let your family know you've done it. Have the conversation. Let them know where you keep it. And please, never, ever put it in a safe deposit box, because you'll be dead before they get that safe deposit, the box open, because no one knows where the key is except you, and you're in a coma. So not there. Someplace accessible. The surrogate was unaware they were chosen. That's why an advance directive will fail. So The Heart of Hospice is a great podcast, and Helen Bauer is her and Jerry Fenter are the ones that run it. And she told me this story that she got a call from an ICU saying, what do you want to do with this patient? You've been named as the surrogate. And she said, what? I don't even know this woman, or I hardly know her. She did know her, but she didn't know her. She never had any conversations with her. This is kind of a cautionary tale. Helen is actually a hospice nurse. And if anybody can handle an advance directive, it's her. She's been in at a lot of deaths. But she said, I was so upset by this. She said, I went home crying because I didn't know this person. I didn't know what she wanted. I didn't know what was best for her. And she went through the whole process, including right down to the funeral, kind of making decisions on the fly, which you don't want to do to a person. It's not fair. It's a big responsibility, and they need to agree to accept it and know you've chosen them. I mean, it's a two-way street here. Another reason, surrogates not available when they're needed. Who knows why? Backpacking through Africa, that's no internet. Can't reach them. No phone, no cell. The surrogate is not qualified to make decisions, so the staff won't follow them. Sometimes a surrogate is chosen, and maybe in the interim they've lost a step or two or 10, and the staff just says, sorry, this person is not qualified anymore to be the surrogate, so we're not going to follow them. The surrogate refuses to follow the directive. It might have seemed like a good idea to be your mom's surrogate, but when it comes to pulling the plug, it doesn't seem like such a good idea, and they're not going to do it. So really, you want to be able to get past things that are difficult, and that could be one of them. That's why an advance directive might fail and mom stays alive on life support. This is always a good one, because I'm a mediator. I've been a mediator for almost 20 years, and family disputes at the bedside, it's like one of the biggest conflicts in a hospital setting. They don't agree. Remember the swooper? He comes in or she comes in, and everybody else has made the decision, okay, she's going to comfort care, and then the swooper comes in and says, nope, we want everything done. Why don't we try a feeding tube for another 6 months? That happens all the time. So that's why an advance directive would fail. But of course, if you have me or someone like me that would stand up and say, no, here it is. She didn't want it. She wrote it down. The surrogate's understanding of the options differs from what the patient said. And this usually is one of those boilerplate things, like it says extraordinary efforts. Don't use those words, because pacemakers used to be extraordinary. Remember that? I mean, I'm old enough to know that this was a miracle. Now they're routine, but they're difficult to turn off at end of life. Katie Butler, I don't know if you've heard of her, but she's fabulous. She wrote a book called Knocking on Heaven's Door about it describes the death of both her parents. One, her father, who it was almost impossible to get his pacemaker, and that was what was keeping him alive. He should have been dead. And her mother, who refused to have anything, and she died a peaceful death. So it's a great book. What she said, though, was when doctors refused to disable her father's pacemaker, it condemned him to a lingering death. If you become incapacitated at the end of life, would you want a pacemaker? Would you want antibiotics, something that will bring you back from the brink? And people really don't think about antibiotics as being like an end-of-life measure. But I just read a study that more people get antibiotics than CPR at the end of life. Like, here they are. No, we're not going to give them CPR, but we'll give them antibiotics for a urinary tract infection, even though they're at the end of life. So you want to spell it out. No, I don't want antibiotics, because if you don't, they're just going to give them to you. That's kind of still the standard of care, so you have to be careful with that one. How about resuscitation at age 80 or 90? The chances are, if you do survive, which is doubtful, like more than 85% of people don't survive. It isn't like TV, believe me. You won't have any kind of quality of life. A lot of times, you know, it affects your brain function. So you need to say, no cardiopulmonary resuscitation. I do not want CPR. I want a DNR. Those are terms you need to be familiar with. Under what circumstances would you want a feeding tube? They're just like pacemakers. Once they go in, they're hard to take out. And you want all of that kind of spelled out in your advance directive. Another one of those terms is quality of life. Who knows what a quality of life is for one person versus another person? And what point would you find it unacceptable? Is it when you don't recognize your family? When you can't toilet yourself? When you have to go to a nursing home? The line in the sand is different, and it changes all the time for the person too. Not you know, they can change their mind tomorrow that they do want a feeding tube. You need to spell it out. Don't just say quality of life. And lastly, avoid the phrase no hope for recovery. If you say, okay, you can just go to comfort care when there's no hope for recovery. Well, what does that mean? Because a lot of doctors, especially oncologists, and I hope there's no oncologists in the room, but they really think there's always hope for recovery because there's always some new drug that they're going to try. And whether or not it's you know, going to be futile or not, they'll say, okay, let's try this. So spell it out. Don't let them give you some kind of treatment that's going to extend the life that you don't want to live. Finally, at the beginning of this, why do so many fail? If a doctor disagrees with your advance directive, and because they're morally opposed or whatever reason, and there's more about that, they can refuse. Just know that. You can't just go and get whatever you want because they can refuse if it's against their, you know, moral wishes, or it's a conscientious objection is really what it is. Religious or ethical beliefs, or if it's medically inappropriate to them, or it's outside their scope of practice. That's kind of something people don't really think about. If you're asking them to do something that they're not qualified to do, they're not going to do it. Or it goes against the facilities policies. Like in the case of a Catholic hospital, there may be things that they're not going to agree to. And so what they do have to do, though, and they're under an ethical obligation to tell you they're not going to treat you and help you find a facility that will treat you. They can also refuse if it goes against like accepted healthcare standards in a particular state. Like if you go, I love New Mexico because you have medical aid in dying now, but in Arizona, if I went to the hospital and said, shoot me up, doc, I'm ready to go, I want medical aid in dying, they just say no, it's not legal here. So they can say no for that. What's the best chance of having your directive honored? If you have, if you're the person writing it, you understand what it says, you clearly spell everything out, you don't put boilerplate phrases in, you actually say what you want, what your wishes are, what your values are. Your surrogate understands it, you've had the conversation. A physician or staff or hospital or wherever you go, your facility, if you're in a nursing home or an independent living facility, if they have it and they know what it is and they will comply with your wishes. If you've changed your advance directive as your conditions and your goals change. If you always provided updated contact information, if they can't reach someone in an emergency, it doesn't do you any good. So make sure that you're updating all the time if somebody moves or whatever. A person continues to have the conversation with their family and friends, especially their surrogate. That's when you're going to have your healthcare directive honored. Finally, and this is kind of a new thing for a lot of people, consider having a video. When you create your advance directive, you can actually, if you have a smartphone, Dale's been using her smartphone all day long, have a video, read your advance directive, this is what you want, and really it's just used as a backup. There's nothing like hearing it from the horse's mouth what they want. If your surrogate needs to prove to a doctor or a staff or a know-it-all swooper His mom saying, no, I don't want a feeding tube under any circumstances. Plus, I think it's reassuring for a family when they hear their loved one say what they want. You have a video of them. Make sure it's time dated, time stamped, make sure you say your name, and keep it on a thumb drive, keep it with your advance directive, and change it if you change your advance directive. And you can email me my contact information if you need any help. There's companies that will actually help you do that, and they put it in a cloud somewhere. I'm not really a big fan of clouds, but they do it. And now there's a thing called My Directives, and they will upload your advance directive. And I have a friend in Maryland. In Maryland, doctors can access your advance directive. They don't need a special password. Once it's in My Directives, it's there for any healthcare professional to see. I'm going to read this one, and I don't really like reading slides because I know you can read. But in 1914, Judge Benjamin Cardoza, he was in New York, I think it was Supreme Court in New York, stated, every human being of adult years and sound mind has a right to determine what shall be done to his own body. That half of it people have heard a lot, but it's the second half. And a surgeon who performs an operation without his patient's consent commits an assault for which he is liable in damages. The right to make your own health care decisions was codified into federal law by the Patient Self-Determination Act in 1991. And it was thanks again to Nancy Kruzan. For a girl who didn't have an advance directive, she made history. After her parents lost their case in the Supreme Court, it shined a light on the need for advance directives and advance care planning. And the second half of this quote is why I have a job with Final Exit, because they feel the right to choose is paramount. Here's a strategy to use when facing conflict or pushback from a medical staff. And whether you're a surrogate or not, if it's your loved one and you think something should be done or not done, this is one thing you can say. But it's especially strong if you are the surrogate, if you have the legal duty and obligation and right to make decisions for a patient. You say, you're doing this treatment without my consent, whoever the patient is. I want my lack of consent put into the patient's medical record. It's important to leave a paper trail. Where have you heard that before? You insist that their denial to follow your direction is put into the medical record. Carry your medical power of attorney and the advance directive with you. Don't leave it to them to say, oh, it's in the medical record, or it's somewhere. Always have it with you, especially if you're making decisions in the moment. Recently, there was a advance directives are legal documents, and doctors have a duty to follow them and listen to your surrogate. If someone acts against a surrogate and a directive, they can be found guilty criminally and civilly and required to pay damages. Recently, there's been a slew of these wrongful life, they call them. Instead of wrongful death, it's wrongful life. You've kept people alive against their wishes when you didn't have to. So you've ignored the surrogate's orders, you went against the advance directive. In some cases, they've kept the patient alive, prolonging their death and leaving the patient and family to suffer emotional and financial injury as a result. Many have filed lawsuits, and the defense has always been, how is it wrong to keep someone alive? Well, it can be. Courts are now ruling keeping someone alive by going against their advance directive or surrogate's orders is a compensable injury, which means you can collect money for it. A woman in Georgia she settled a case for over $1 million when a provider kept her grandmother alive with CPR. They gave her 90-year-old grandmother CPR, ignored the DNR, and she kept saying, don't do it, and they did it anyway. And the Supreme Court of Georgia, and I want to have this embroidered on a pillow, They denied the doctors of all these years, always have claimed immunity. Oh, you can't because we're keeping someone alive. What's wrong with that? They said it's the will of the patient or her designated agent, not the will of the healthcare provider that controls. And that's a precedent-setting case in my book. Other courts are going to see this in other states, and even though it was from Georgia, doesn't matter, a judge in Georgia has said, and that's the truth. That's really what the Patient Self-Determination Act says. You have the right to make your own medical choices. So final exit, if you are a member, and I have all kinds of stuff in the back. There's magazines, there's things to join. They offer a free surrogate consulting service, me, and I don't suggest medical treatment. I'm not a doctor. I have, like my husband likes to say, 6 more years before I become a doctor. But no, that's never going to happen. I help you enforce your advance directives, or as a surrogate, the advance directives for your patient. And if I can't do it, and as a mediator, I can have a meeting with the doctor and the person and try to get this worked out. And if I can't get it worked out, Final Exit has a great attorney, and he will step in and they'll actually sue if they have to. And all of this is pro bono. Nobody pays a thing for any of it. I have a little case study just to kind of illustrate what it is I do. It's Bob and Diane and Bob and Diane. Names have been changed. When Bob was first diagnosed with dementia, he wrote his advance directive naming his wife Diane as his surrogate. The couple carefully discussed his options, and his express wish was not to have any treatments that would extend his life. After his doctor declared Bob incapacitated, Diane and the doctor signed a POST, and a POST is a physician's order for life-sustaining treatment. People sometimes sign it if they're within the last year of life. It's like a prescription. It goes with the person wherever they go, to whatever facility, and it's called a POST. That's the abbreviation. They signed one. And the doctor and the patient usually sign it, or their representative. And in it called for comfort care only for Bob. That's all he wanted. As his disease progressed, she had to admit him to a facility, and she kept trying to get them to enforce that POST, but they kept giving him curative drugs, and he had a lot of different other diseases, kidney disease, he had prostate cancer, a heart problem, and they kept giving him drugs to help cure him, or they'd give him tests like a chest x-ray. Why would a guy on comfort care need a chest x-ray, you might ask? Well, he probably doesn't. So she contacted me, and we have been in touch probably since May. Yesterday, I get emails from her all the time. Part of my job is I hold her hand, I give her a pep talk, like, you're doing a great job, you're a wonderful surrogate. I said to her, finally, why don't you write a letter, send it certified to the doctor, spell out exactly what you want, what you don't want for Bob. And she's done that. Now, she's vigilant, she goes to the nurse's station, she checks that medical record, she sees what they're giving him for drugs, and if they don't follow it, she's going to call, and we'll have the Fen attorney step in. So, are there any questions at this point?
Yes, wait a minute. Stop sharing your talk when you were talking about whether the 5 wishes can be legal in the state.
Right.
So what is New Mexico's law on that in terms of making 5 wishes legal?
Well, you would go to the 5 Wishes website, and there.
But you don't know.
No, because I don't live in New Mexico. I'd have to know all 50 states in the District of Columbia what their rules are, and that would be. But I'll tell you something. If somebody contacts me, emails me, calls me, and says, and this happens all the time, what's the rule in Indiana? That's how I know about the living will in Indiana. Somebody contacted me and said, well, what's the rule? So I went to their website, I looked it up, and they had to have a living will form, which I downloaded and sent to the person. So really, I can't make out an advance directive for anybody. All I do is educate. That's my job. I educate. So 5 Wishes has a great website. It's full of information. All you have to do is look for that link that says, which state do you live in? You pull up New Mexico, and it will either say, it's legal in New Mexico, or you need 2 witnesses, or you need a notary, or you need some extra form to go with it.
Question back at the back.
Well, there is a form in New Mexico called the MOST form, the green form. I forget what the MOST stands for.
It's medical orders for life-sustaining treatment.
It's the same as a post.
Yeah.
It's not an advance directive. It's a physician's order for treatment. And some people think it's better than an advance directive, but it doesn't really say a lot. I mean,
Okay.
so
it
it's
does
not
go
really an advance directive.
But it does go in your medical file.
Yes, it does go, and it travels with you. Question. You have a MOST form, which is similar to a POST form, which says you do not want to go to the hospital. And you're in a car accident. EMTs have to follow certain rules. And if your MOST form is in the car, I can't answer that. I really don't know if they would take you to the hospital, but if I were you, I would have it in my glove compartment so they would see it. So if they took you to the hospital, I don't, you know, it's kind of a funny thing. EMTs, their duty is to keep someone alive. So that's why, that's a tricky one.
Okay. But you also recommend the advance directive
In
in
your-
addition to the MOST form?
Again, the question is the advance directive in addition to the MOST form? Because, yeah, I think the MOST form doesn't have anything about organ donations or your funeral wishes or any of that. I mean, it's kind of a supplement to your advance directive.
Thank you.
Can you have copies of the advance directive and then like you initial and date it or sign it and date it or something? So
Well,
it's like if you have a copy, if you have one in your glove compartment and then like you get home, do you have to remember to grab that and bring it to the house with you?
oh, no, I guess the question is can you have copies of your,
And
yes.
then those signed and dated or something to know that
Yes.
even though it's a copy, it is a valid copy.
A valid copy is the first one that you signed and dated, and any copy you make of that is a valid copy.
Okay, and
So-
so it wouldn't need an original signature?
No, it's a valid copy. They go by the last date too. So if you had 2 advance directives, say you forgot to take one out of your glove compartment, they'd go by the oldest, the newest date. That's the one that rules.
Okay, so just having a copy.
Is fine.
One in your house, one in your glove compartment.
All over the place. The trick is making sure you gather them all back and destroy them if you do a new one. So that's really the trick. What is the difference between medical aid and dying and hospice? Well, medical aid and dying is more proactive. You can ask for drugs if there's rules here about you have to be a resident, you have to be over 18, you have to have a terminal condition within 6 months. Those are the rules. In hospice, you just have to be within 6 months of death diagnosed by a doctor, but you can't ask for drugs to kill you. That is not allowed. You'd have to switch to medical aid and dying, which you can do in this state. I mean, they'll give you enough morphine to take away the pain. So most of the time, medical aid and dying, a lot of times people are already in hospice. They're already getting care from a hospice team. So it's
And that's a good segue to the fact that we are having a panel on medical aid and dying on Monday morning at 9 a.m. Mountain Time with Barrick Wolf and Deborah Armstrong, who was the representative who championed that bill in New Mexico.
Is Bob Schwartz on that panel?
He's not, but
okay, never mind.
he was on last year's.
Yeah, I thought he was on it.
We have the video on the,
okay.
the festival website. Yep.
In person or
That is an online session.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody, for your attention.
Thank you, Althea. Great session.